job finding tips and strategies, resume tips, what to include in your cover letter, and how to manage your references are all part of this Bernie Chats with Bart Zych, certified resume strategist. Now let's get started. We're back talking with Bart Zych, founder of the KISS Academy and KISS Career Coaching. He's a certified resume strategist, and he has lots to tell us about his experience with helping people get jobs and coaching on job finding techniques. Bart, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
I'm just going to piggyback off of what you said. So absolutely, I created KISS Coaching and the KISS Academy, which is an online school with courses that I'm building up, focusing on business communication, job search, resume development, and related documents.
So Bart, what would you say the main purpose of a resume is?
One word answer: marketing. Think of your resume and your cover letter as your marketing documents, and as the acronym for in persuasion that we use for the different steps in persuasion, AIDA: attention, interest, desire, action. So your cover letter and your resume as marketing tools serve the purpose to grab the attention of the recruiter and gain the interest of the hiring manager. So that's the marketing part. And then if or when you get invited to an interview, that's where you're selling. So the marketing is passive. You've written your resume and you submitted it. There's nothing else you can do at this point. And then your sales is active. You go to your job interview, and now you can participate in the sales process. You can persuade, you can give examples, you can provide a proof and explanations as well. Mm-hmm. So think about it as a two-step process. Marketing, resume and cover letter, job interview, you're selling.
I see. Great.
For the past 8 or 9 years, part of the courses that I was teaching at college was career development and resume writing, because it's part of the writing part of business education and writing and creating cover letters. And I quickly discovered that not only students, but a lot of people in their careers, they don't know themselves very well, right? Now they operate automatically, so maybe they never took the time to look inwardly about how they arrived at the position they are at right now. But I've dealt with senior level, clients, and I've looked at their resume. I'm thinking, you're coming to me for help. I should be coming to you, But I discovered that that's not the case. The case is that it's much more of a coaching situation or a coaching conversation, and not so much resume writing. This is why I decided to pursue the certified resume strategist designation, because of the word strategist. Writing a resume is a strategy, and not just getting to know, not just identifying your career progression, but what made you do it? Why did you do it? And I ask some people, what are your accomplishments? And the typical answer is, I don't have any. Okay. Especially if we're looking at people who are just beginning their career. And I say, no, wait a minute. Let's review. And then we have a conversation. I ask them some pertinent questions, and then their eyes open up and they say, wow, I didn't know that's an accomplishment. You see, because you didn't look inwardly. So the way I work with clients on resumes, and students as well, is that it's not a resume writing activity. It's a getting to know yourself activity, and recognizing what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, being able to talk about them, being able to develop a plan for, mitigating the weaknesses and capitalizing on the strengths, and then communicating that in a resume, which is a marketing document. It's not a job search document, it's a marketing document. So, I say to my students and clients, what's your value proposition? And they say, what does that mean? And I say, okay, let's talk sales.
Yeah, that's right. It's very transferable. And it's almost like you could break it down into two segments. One, learning about and understanding the topic, and then two, putting it onto paper, right? Makes sense. I
Absolutely.
love that. I love this whole strategy idea behind resumes. It sounds very
Yeah.
valuable. It would like to
And
be very valuable for a lot of people.
and it's absolutely a strategy, because what works for applying to one type of company or employer will not work for another type. There's a
Totally.
lot of research involved, and it is marketing and sales, right? I mean,
Hmm.
as a salesperson, what do you do first?
Yeah.
You research your potential clients, and as a marketer, what are the demographics? What do they need? What do they want? What problems do they have? And then we need to tailor a document that communicates how you, as the product, will help to solve those problems.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a good. So figuring out where the gap is, where the need is,
Exactly.
and then explaining to them, the decision maker, how you're going to fill that need better than anybody else could.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
so, I have some people ask me, should I use a resume writing service? Or they
Hmm.
say to me, can you write a resume for me? I say, no, because the
Hmm.
only person who can do that is you.
Right.
But I can guide you, I can facilitate the process. And I'd rather do that, because I'd rather teach you how to fish than give you the fish.
Right.
Right? Because if you understand how to do it, the next time you can try to do it by yourself. Now you're empowered. If I write it for you, I'm not empowering you.
What are the one or three key things that people should consider when they're going through that process of figuring out what the topic is going to be and what their proposition is going to be in the resume?
All right, that's a big question. Let's see if we can break it down. The two words that I mentioned a moment ago, value proposition, is key. Being able to define what you as a candidate
Hmm.
can offer. What value do you offer to your employer?
Hmm.
And the value that you can offer, that you've defined,
Hmm.
needs to match the needs and the wants and the challenges and the problems of the employer. And that's why I keep saying it's like sales. It is sales.
Hmm. It is for
Uh,
sure.
so being able to define, what do you bring to the table, or simply answer the question, why should I hire you? And the answer is not generic. It's a little bit different for every situation. So being able to adapt that.
Let me cover some of the basics of a resume. Why don't we do that?
Sure.
Should every resume be sent in with a cover letter?
Only about 5% of cover letters are actually read. Looking at that statistic, it might make you say, then I'm just not going to spend time or invest my time in writing one.
Hmm.
But then I say, on the other hand, what if you don't send one,
Hmm.
and the company that you sent your application to is one of those companies that actually does read the cover letter?
Hmm. Makes sense.
You just shot yourself in both feet.
And I
Right?
would imagine too, if the company says include a cover letter,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
better darn well include a
Absolutely.
cover letter. Don't overlook that
Absolutely.
detail. I think
No,
that's one of the key things too. Is with when a company's put requests in their job posting, make sure you address those requests.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think even writing a cover letter, even if it's not read, I think is a very useful activity. It gives you it gives you several opportunities that you don't have with just a resume.
Hmm.
It gives you an opportunity to tell a short story. It gives you an opportunity to elaborate on something that you're really proud of, that you think might match the requirements of the company you're applying to.
Right.
It also, and this is very important, it also gives you the opportunity to demonstrate to your employer your writing skills.
For sure.
And during my time, I've spoken a lot with employers who provide internship opportunities for students. And their number one comment or concern is, when I say to them, what is one skill that you would like to see your interns develop more? The number one answer from everybody is writing. People can have great presentation skills. They may verbally communicate very well. They may work well on teams.
Hmm.
They may be excellent at doing research,
Hmm.
at customer service.
Hmm.
But when it comes to writing, this is, and I've seen this with my students as well. It's the writing that is the weakest skill, generally speaking. I think students and most people have never actually been taught how to write.
Mm.
Sure, in high school, they take time to write essays, write stories, they study literature, but nobody is taught at a high school level, because I believe in university, it's
Mhm.
kind of too late. Um, Nobody is taught how to write, and this is the acronym for my brand, KISS,
Mhm.
keeping it short, simple, and specific.
Mhm.
When I have students from high school in my business courses, when they start to write, they write like they were writing fiction stories. They're writing essays, but
Mhm.
that's not how we write in business.
So maybe one of the key differentiators is the difference between writing and communicating.
Yes.
So
And
being able to put across your message in a concise manner is something a lot of people lack. There's a funny story about a copywriter who was told, "Can you write me a story?" And he said, "Sure, I can write it in 3,000 words." And they said, "Well, can you write it in 250 words?" And the copywriter said, "Sure, but it'll cost you extra."
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
we're laughing, but it's true.
Hmm.
Being able to be concise, and the 5 C's of writing. Actually, I got the KISS acronym
Yeah.
from the 5 C's of writing. And the
And what are
five
the
C's:
five C's?
clear, correct, complete, courteous, and concise.
Ah, okay.
Right? And
Very
I
good.
thought 5 C's, we can summarize that in 3: short, simple, specific. So I took the concise to
So that's how
another
you got the KISS
level.
acronym. I like that. That's
I
good.
took that to another level, but absolutely,
It
I
works.
think it's the conciseness that many native English speakers have a challenge with,
Mm.
and then compounded on top of that is the correct grammar, sentence structure. So somebody who has English as another language might have that as a challenge, the correct part. But
Yeah.
so many native English speakers are such poor writers.
I was going to say, even as native English speakers, you could have that same
Absolutely.
challenge.
Punctuation, sentence structure,
Yes,
and
for
so on
sure.
and so on. And it's extremely important. But there's one tip that I kind of tested out with my students, and it seems to work really well
Mhm.
for everybody.
Okay, great.
I noticed that even though somebody might speak and present well, orally, verbally,
Right.
when it comes to writing, something strange happens. And that is, people try to appear more educated, more intelligent, and more professional
Mm,
than they actually are.
right.
And that results in a word salad.
Mm,
Uh, Words that I have to go to the dictionary to look up, or
mhm.
they're archaic, from 18th century English or something. A lot of younger people are guilty of this, but so are professionals sometimes.
Sure.
This is the tip I have. If you're going to write something, a paragraph or a sentence. Now, this takes a little bit of time at the beginning, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. Do this. Take your phone or whatever device you have, take your recording application and record and say what you want to write, but say it like you're talking to somebody.
Right.
Press stop, press play, and write what you said,
Hmm.
and then edit for punctuation.
Awesome. That's a great tip.
And when my students start to do this, they come back the next day and I said, "Did you write this? Or did your friend write this, or your parents, or your manager or
Mhm.
something?" "No, I wrote this." "Did you use the technique that I shared with you?" "Yes." "See?" So the goal of trying to appear more intelligent, more educated, more professional than you really are, most of the time it backfires.
A lot of times we want to prove that we are a creative writer or an English literature graduate,
Yeah.
right?
And I tell people, you know what? Take those multi-syllable words and throw them out and put on shorter words, easier words, because this way you're making your writing more accessible to more people.
Mm,
This is true for resumes and cover letters.
makes sense.
Imagine a recruiter, and we said a recruiter is a gatekeeper. This is not the hiring person. This is
Yeah.
not the hiring manager. Their job is to sift through mountains of resumes and simply create two piles: in or out.
Right.
for further consideration to be read in more detail or out. This gets shorter and shorter every year, but typically in a busy, large corporation, a recruiter will spend 6 to 10 seconds initially glancing at your resume. The more long words you have, the more difficult it is for a recruiter to skim through your resume,
Makes sense.
which means you're helping the recruiter to take your resume and put it into the garbage pile. If you're trying to be too creative with your giant words,
You're working at cross purposes, working against yourself if you're doing that.
Exactly.
So question. I love the segue here. How long should a resume be?
I just did a YouTube video about this yesterday.
Did you really? Wow, it's such a great topic because I find there's
It's
confusion
so
out there.
timely as well.
Yeah.
You know, I had a client. He sent me recently a resume, and I provide feedback on resumes and so on.
That's part of the services you offer is
Part of the
resume
services.
audit.
It's a video audit. So you know, it's
Awesome.
like this. The person is looking at their resume and they can see exactly what I'm highlighting.
That's such a great way to get the feedback.
And it is because I can be very specific,
Yeah.
down to the word, saying, you know, replace this word.
Good.
And he sent me this resume on one page, and he had barely any margins on the page, top and sides, and everything was really squished together with very small font. And some of the suggestions I gave to him was consider bleeding your resume onto a second page. Increase the margin, increase the font size, increase the white space, because design is a critical element. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because imagine, you know, you're spending your whole day looking at resumes as a recruiter. You're going to get eye strain.
Yep.
If you're looking at a resume that's chock full of text, it's going to make you cranky, especially if you've looked at hundreds of them in one day.
Mm-hmm.
And a cranky recruiter is not a friendly recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're decreasing your chance. So I said to him, bring it over to a second page. And he said, but all the research I did online suggested that I keep my resume to one page.
Wow, one page.
One page. And I said, you know, and this guy had, he was at the beginning of his career, but he already had work experience.
Right.
And I think he listed 2 companies that he's already worked at. He had some great accomplishments. He had some good education. And I said to him, you know, elaborate about some of the tools you used to do your projects in your school, and elaborate on this and so on. And he said, oh, but that's going to make it too long. And I said, you know, these days with micro certifications, with continuous learning, with tools like linkedin.com and so on, your certification section, your education section should be growing as you progress in your career, because it's evidence of continuous learning. And so, you know,
that's a very good point.
Yeah, and because of the trend these days. Now, a one-page resume may have been the ideal length 20 years ago, but it's not anymore.
Right.
And he said to me, well, actually, I told him, you know, how long your resume is doesn't really affect how much time the recruiter spends looking at it. Because there have been studies done. What they did is they hooked up all these electrodes to recruiters' eyes and brain,
right,
and they created a heat map. Now, do you know what a heat map is?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it shows where you're focusing on.
Yeah, it shows the screen, and it shows in color, like red is where the most attention goes, and yellow is a bit less, and then green and then blue where is the least. And it showed that recruiters spend the 6 to 10 seconds. That's the average, by the way, that a recruiter spends scanning your resume. They spend 6 to 10 of those seconds looking at the top third of your first page of your resume. So he said, well, shouldn't I make my resume one page then, so he could see, or she could see all the information? I said, but wait. I said, no. What that means is that your most relevant, your most important information should be in the top third of your first page of your resume. What does that mean? And where do they spend their time looking? They spend their time looking at your name and your contact information, the first 1 or 2 positions that you most recently held, so reverse chronological, And also, if you have a profile statement or summary of qualifications or career highlights.
Mm-hmm.
That is what they spend the most time looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Which means if they say, this looks good, regardless of whether your resume is 1, 2, or 3 page, yes, sometimes 3-page resumes are acceptable, especially if you're in education or government or academic or legal.
Or even if you're in the middle of your career, then
Or if you're an accomplished executive, absolutely.
you might go beyond that.
Absolutely. Now, I had a client who came to me with a 15-page resume.
Did he call it a book?
Well, it depends where the person is from, because it's cultural too. For example, in Europe and the Middle East, the CV,
right,
or the curriculum vitae is more common than a resume.
And a CV is what is the real difference? I think there's a lot of confusion about that. What is the difference between a CV and a resume?
The CV, you elaborate on your education experience a lot more.
Right.
So you might include the courses you took and the projects you did. You're a lot more detailed.
So in a CV, you elaborate your education, not necessarily your previous employment history.
Oh, absolutely. You also focus on the
so
history,
on all your experience. It's more of a list.
like a list of your history.
Okay.
Whereas a resume is much more of a strategic document or a marketing document.
I see.
So it's equally important in a resume to pay attention to what you do include as well as what you do not include. You want to leave some stuff out to encourage the hiring manager to ask you questions or to elaborate. Because then they're like, you know what, I'd like to find out more about this. I'm going to call that person in for an interview.
Right.
Whereas a CV is, you pretty much listed everything there. So if you're going to work for NGOs, non-government organizations, universities, university professors, they would much more tend towards a CV style. But what was I saying? So if the recruiter looks at the top third of your resume and says, you know what, this has a lot of information that matches with what we're looking for, we're going to put it into explore further pile. And then the hiring manager, or the next step in the hiring process, is going to start looking at the second and possibly third page as well.
I suppose, Bart, that if the recruiter looks at the first third of the first page, or even looks at the first page and just does his 6 to 10 second scan, if they find something interesting that holds their attention, then they might just as well flip through to the second page and the third page and then put it into the in pile. Right.
Now, a recruiter typically, generally, I would say, doesn't do that simply because of the volume of resumes they have.
I see.
So it's kind of like this. And maybe you've had this experience, or maybe some of the listeners have had this experience, where you send off a job application and your first interview is with a recruiter over the phone. It's a phone interview. And typically phone interviews are conducted by junior recruiters. So talking with a junior recruiter requires a different strategy than talking with a hiring manager. They have a form with check boxes next to the questions. Their job is to ask certain questions, and their job is to qualify or disqualify you, depending on your answers. So if a recruiter asks you a yes or no question, you answer yes or no.
Right.
If a hiring manager asks you a yes or no question, or a closed-ended question, you would answer yes or no and give an example. But if you do that for a recruiter or a junior recruiter, you might confuse them.
Right.
Because they're
looking for through the check boxes and saying, did he answer yes? Did he answer no?
Yeah, but you give them a maybe and they're like, well, maybe I'm just going to put no.
Right.
So when to summarize the answer is, when you're talking, in your first phone interview, when you're talking with a junior recruiter who's asking you pointed questions, just answer the question and don't elaborate, generally speaking. Now, there's exceptions everywhere, but generally speaking. Makes
sense. And I suppose the generality could be identified by a gap. If there's a gap where the recruiter stops talking, then maybe they're looking for you to give more of an answer.
That could be it, or their writing. Another
Yeah.
reason why margins are so important on a resume.
Oh,
It's because then whoever is looking at a paper copy of your resume,
yeah.
they can take notes. And yeah, they
Interesting.
still print out your resumes. So, and this is especially true if you're going for a panel interview,
Mm,
where you're being interviewed by a committee or a group of people. Typically, you will notice that not all of them have laptops, but all of them will have a paper copy of your resume.
perfect. Makes
So
sense.
by having margins and um, white space, which means don't crunch it together, but also don't spread it out too much,
Right.
you're giving them an opportunity or a place to take notes.
And so, what about references? Should people put references into the resume, or when they're submitting a resume, should they submit references as well, both in as a general practice and when the employer requests references?
Right. A very timely question. 2 weeks ago, I did a YouTube video on this topic,
Oh, great.
and the short answer is no. Uh, Back many years ago, I don't see this as often anymore, although I do still see it occasionally. People would write at the end of the resume, references will be provided upon request.
Right.
Uh, that's pretty much common sense. There's really no need to write that,
Mm-hmm.
because if a employer wants your references, they're going to ask,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not going to sit there and go,
Yeah.
So the first tip is the phrase references will be provided upon request. Take it out. Never put it on your resume. It
Right.
serves no purpose, no strategic purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, unfortunately, there are still employers who ask for references even before you're shortlisted as a candidate. They should not be doing this, because managing your references is a professional thing to do. So, before I answer the second part of your questions, I'm just going to say that anytime you ask someone to be a reference for you,
Mm-hmm.
treat them professionally and make sure that when your potential employer does say that they're ready to contact your references, get on the phone, not email. Get on the phone to your reference and tell them and say that, I'm very proud to say that I've been shortlisted, and this somebody from this or this company may be giving you a call or sending you an email shortly.
Mm-hmm.
So always do that with your references. I've had several situations where a student they would ask me, "Can you be my reference?" Sure, of course, you're my student. I know you. I like you. You've done well in the course. And then a week passes, a month passes, and I forget. And then I get a phone call. "Hi, we're calling for this and this." And I'm thinking, who? What?
Right.
So, you want to be top of mind in your reference.
Mm-hmm.
Always give them a heads up.
So when you're
Uh,
doing that call, would you recommend um, giving the person who's giving the reference some hints on what that person will want to hear about? Perhaps some of the experiences
yeah.
that you had, and so
I would
coaching them a little bit.
absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. There's nothing wrong with having a conversation with your reference. In fact, I would encourage it strategically. It's a great move.
Yeah.
Tell them what type of job you're applying for.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them what they're looking for. Tell
Mm-hmm.
them what's important.
Right.
Uh, One of my references, because I still apply for contracts and so on,
Mm-hmm.
she always asks me, what is it that you would like me to focus on? And we have that conversation.
Great. I remember
So that's
calling
absolutely
when I was between corporate jobs, and the company that I was applying for was going to check out references. And I called my previous boss and I said, "Hey, Reed, um, you're going to be getting a phone call from so and so, and they would probably really like to hear about when I won the Salesman of the Year award, and when I increased the sales territory by 40%. Those kinds of things are
exactly.
probably great stories that they would like to hear about."
Exactly.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, as a person looking for employment or managing their employment seeking, you're not only managing what you put on your resume, on your cover letter, but you're being a manager. You're managing your resources, you're managing your conversation with a recruiter, you're
Sure.
strategizing how to speak with the hiring manager. There's a lot of moving pieces here that we need to pay attention to. So just to make sure I answer the other part of that question is that one of the ways one of the best ways to demonstrate professionalism as a job seeker is consistency and branding yourself, right? So, for example, a company, every company has a logo, has a letterhead. I'm not saying you need a logo, but you need to be consistent with your header, with your name, your contact information. Make sure that is consistent and the same on your resume, on your cover letter, and a separate document, a third document, which is your list of references. Use the same header, use the same font, use the same headings, this heading styles, same bolding, so that when a hiring manager looks at all of these documents that you've submitted, they see that it's consistent. And consistency is a trait that is very desirable for every employer. You know, you show up consistently to work on time, you produce consistently high quality results, and that all started by signaling that you are a consistent person through your written communication.
Perfect. To wrap up, can you tell us a little bit more about where people can find you and learn more about what you do?
I think the best thing to do if people are interested in learning more about how to become an expert job seeker, and how do you know if you're an expert job seeker? Well, you find a job, is to go to my website, which is bartzych.com. That's BARTZYCH.com. And from there, you'll be able to see clearly a link to my YouTube channel, which is KISS Coaching as well on YouTube. And that's where you can find a whole bunch of free video resources on specifically how to build and improve your resume, as well as tips on answering job interview questions and other business communication related information. But specifically, this channel is focused on resume and job interviews and for job seekers.
That's awesome, Bart. Thanks for that. And thanks. I'm sure there's a lot of great information for people there, job seekers and people who are employed right now and perhaps passively job seeking and things.